Seymour?
How are you?
Let's talk about Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider.
Yeah,
Schneider?
Not Zack Snyder.
No.
Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider.
Dan Schneider. So he is known for creating all of this original content, live action content on the kids channel Nickelodeon, right? You got little kids.
Absolutely. My kids were in love with some of these shows, from Zoe to some of these live actions, music, and it's a lot of people were involved in it, and a lot of musical production, a lot of
Young kids.
interactions.
Young kids. These
Yeah.
are shows for
We're
young
talking
kids
about-
about young kids.
We're talking about like maybe kids from probably roughly age of 8 to maybe 14.
Amanda Bynes, a lot of the Disney kids were on there, or pop stars like Ariana Grande was on some of these shows. iCarly, the Amanda Show, Keenan and Kel, Good Burger. It's a bunch of these, right?
Ton of these kids who basically now coming up or up and coming movie stars today, maybe even performers, entertainers, whatever you can call them. They're up and coming. It's the new generation. It's the next wave, so to speak. Before it used to be a Disney Plus or any of the Disney characters, Nickelodeon, same concept.
But this guy, to some extent, put Nickelodeon like big time on the map. I mean, it's always been marketed as a kids network. They kind of differentiated themselves, I guess, from like Disney and things like that by going not just cartoons but these live action shows. And it's a great concept. The kids watch shows about kids their own age doing all sorts of fun stuff, or in cool scenarios, and that's what these shows are. Okay.
So the biggest issue with him is it's allegedly he was a chauvinistic pig on the set, and he was making a lot of inappropriate comments towards these young kids. But some of it was maybe just innuendos, but some of it maybe subliminal messaging.
So he's obviously got a weird personality, creative genius, but a weird personality, and now these are years later, right?
2 decades almost now.
Right. Some of these kids who are now adults are coming out and saying, stuff was weird back then. He would make us do weird things. He would touch us in a weird way. Not anything like directly sexual, but a lot of it sounds overtly sexual or with a lot of heavy innuendo. But you see some clips now of him behind the scenes, off camera, interacting with some of these kids. They're sitting on his lap. He's got his arms around them.
And I think that's a time that I think post-COVID and post the Me Too movement has been a lot more attention being brought to safe space, safe environment, and I think back then I don't think it was as prevalent, especially, and I think it should have been probably with kid shows and kid actors.
You go back past generations, growing up as kids, you probably sat on the laps of your uncles and your distant relatives and things like that. The reality is today, I probably would not let my kids,
right,
or at least not force them to sit on relatives, like distant relatives and outer relatives' laps and stuff like that. You would never think of that, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen anymore, right? That he may have seen himself as the sort of father figure on the set to all these kids, and his job is to make them feel comfortable in front of a camera and calm and not as anxious, and this is still a fun time and we can hang out. And
But I think it's interesting that you bring it up, because I think especially after the Me Too movement, and I think, and properly so, this is still a professional environment. When they're on set, it's still a professional environment, and the same way that I would not, or you will not be, you will not ask anybody to sit on your lap in a regular office.
No.
Why should that? And I understand they're kids. I understand they're trying to, maybe, even if his intentions are all pure and all good, 101 right now in human resources would be probably asking any coworker for any reason to sit on your lap is not acceptable.
Nickelodeon benefited through that production through the roof.
Absolutely.
And put Nickelodeon on the map. Was it done properly? Was it done without improper touching, improper everything else? That's a wholly different issue.
all right, so let's look at that side, because there's some interesting allegations here, right? Some of these now adult former child stars have said that he forced them to drink alcohol before they were old enough to drink alcohol. He created some sort of like a bully culture, pitting some of these kids against each other in competitive ways and stuff that wasn't really like germane to acting or the scripts of the show. There's this whole thing about, you mentioned chauvinistic before, where he is not wanting really any little to no female writers on any of these shows. There's a lot of shows, right? There are probably like a dozen shows that this guy was a creator of or a major producer on, and there's little to no female writers in any of these. So there's a lot of weird things that are coming out, and then you see all these clips, right, where he's doing these sort of like weird things where some of these kids, and they're now, the kids in those videos are sort of corroborating the weirdness of it by saying, like, yeah, we were totally weirded out by that. One of the girls, Amanda Bynes, I think, came out and said he made her at whatever age she was, 11, 12, 13, give him massages. Like, in what world is that okay?
I agree. First of all, forcing anybody to give a massage is not okay.
Child, but even
it's not okay, no. Period. We went through the NFL issue with this as well recently. It's not okay, and then you said it.
All bad. In this situation, you have multiple people coming out and saying very similar things. You also have him coming out and saying, essentially, to some capacity, acknowledging some of it, not so much maybe anything like inappropriate or illegal, but saying that he probably owes people apologies for things, right?
Were there pictures or videos that came out?
Yeah,
also
there's
from
stuff on the internet where he's,
right.
Really inappropriately hugging.
The one I've seen is the one with him and Amanda Bynes in the jacuzzi, which seems extremely inappropriate in a professional environment.
Where were the parents during all these parents?
Right.
And second thing is, they were collecting royalties from all of this. And nobody seems to complain about any of that.
But doesn't that
it literally seems to resemble the exact same discussions that people were having around the Michael Jackson.
Very similar.
Very similar idea.
Very similar.
If this was so bad, where were the parents, right?
Where were all the other responsible adults, right?
Yeah.
Like, my wife has a friend who's a teacher, and for many years she was an elementary school teacher, and somehow she got hooked up with a sweet gig where she's now a studio teacher. She's essentially a tutor for, like a music band, a group of kids in a music band that go on tour. And she teaches them school. It's a sweet gig, right? But the amount of, like, adults that are on set with her is bananas. Like, she told us it before, right? I mean, there's, like, security people, there's medical staff, there's child psychologists, or therapists.
But that's present.
No,
go 20 years ago.
Yes. But I'm saying, forget the parents, right? Maybe they work jobs, right? And this is the kid's job. They drop them off at the studio. They're entrusting them to these people. It's not a back alley. It's not a third world country. It's, right? Okay. Where's the job of the studio or the production crew or whatever to, like, aren't we supposed to protect these kids? Do we think that this guy was making so much money for the network and for all the people involved at the top, they looked the other way? They didn't care, right? I can't imagine that nobody thought any of this was weird in the moment.
Right? At the end of the day, I think it's like the two people just simply did not even understand what was happening.
Who two people?
The executives at the top. He was the new hot guy. There was such a huge demand for him and supply for kids to be part of his shows. Nobody really cared. Maybe it's a willful blindness, or they just turn the other way. Whatever you want to call it, it will never be okay. We know that actions 15, 20 years ago will never be okay today. But as an industry, we have two positions. There's individual Dan Schneider and the Nickelodeon. Maybe we have to separate them out to figure out where's the fault lies. Troublesome.
It's troublesome, and it's unsettling. So, whatever.
Guys,
all right. Hopefully, like you said,
stay away from movie industry.
Yeah.
Like you said, hopefully there's no part 2 on this.
No part. I don't want to do a part 2 on this. I don't need to find any more out about it. I've read enough.
All right, guys.
Well, guys, good show.
All right.
Later.
Later.
Yeah.